Okay. All right. We are now entering the so-called graveyard shift. Amongst the colleagues, is there anyone who's got an idea where the concept of graveyard shift comes from? Graveyard shift, where does that come from? Anyone who can enlighten us? Because it's very common, and especially in workshop and sessions, after lunch, people talk of graveyard shift. I always wonder, where does that come from? I know I've got smart colleagues, enlightened, wise colleagues. So please, let me just check who knows where does the graveyard shift phrase come from. Because I would like to know. Okay, so there's no willing person, there's no person who's willing to share. All right. I think we can move on. On the aspect we've covered, we are almost beyond the halfway point or halfway mark on our workshop for today. As I always want to make sure that we still flow on the same path, we are still on the same destination, we're within the reach of each other. May I just take this moment just to check if there are any reflections, observations, comment, questions, the subject matter we're dealing with, any angle you like to tackle, any point you like to hold on to, or anything you like to reflect on. We've covered quite a lot since the morning, and there's quite a few slides to go through before we can nip it and finalize our session. So before we can dump too much, may I just check if there are any questions? Maybe by indication of on the chat, if may ask whether so far has the information shared, the context in which it's been provided, helpful? Is it helping? Is it understandable? Do you think it can be implementable, or do you think you can implement it? Do you think we can give it a try? Do you buy into it? If yes, you can indicate on the chat. If not sure, maybe still testing, you can also indicate on the chat. Any form of feedback. One senior gentleman in the army used to tell me that, Stembiso, one thing you must know is that feedback is a breakfast of champions. So I want to be a champion too. And I do think feedback you can provide for what we are embarking on would be helpful. At least so that we can be able to get a good indicator. I see Etienne, why are you not saying it loud? We want to hear your voice.
I thought I'll keep it for everyone to look at. But Mr. Google says graveyard shift or graveyard watch was the name coined for work shift in the early morning, typically midnight until 8 a.m. It originally comes from USA, but in the 1500s, a similar type of phrase was used where the people in the nighttime, they had to go and dig up the graves, take out the bones, take that to a boneyard, and then reuse the graves itself. So that's where this comes from, and it's quite a gory one to use.
But the question, Etienne, is why is it relevant for after lunch kind of engagements in workshop, or the way it is used, is it rather appropriate?
The way it's used, it's actually not appropriate if you look at what the definition is. You find it quite a lot on your PSD type of environment where people work night shift. They always say the graveyard shift is from 12 to 8 in the morning. But graveyard shift, I think, means for us is after you've eaten and your stomach is full, you don't feel like working anymore. So that's, I think, why all our colleagues are so quiet as well. They're all now tired.
Look, Google, obviously, we provide some in-depth reflection. One version I heard, I don't know how true is it, is that normally during the graveyard, if you are assigned to actually look after the graves, because people lying there are all late, nothing really happens. So essentially after lunch, everyone, like you said, is full. No one really responds. So it's a bit of a difficult shift because you're all by yourself. I hope I won't be all by myself.
It seems, at least we are here, and there's a couple of other people that indicated as well.
Good stuff, great stuff. So yeah, let us proceed. Thanks for that insight. It always helps to check some of these concepts where they come from. English is English. We can also learn from it. So if we look at some of the elements of PMS at UniZulu, it will appear, therefore, that in organizations who are adopting performance management systems, it is not everything for everyone. It is a highly customizable endeavor. You can choose which aspect you want to adopt. If you look at the first video for actors, they were talking more about performance management at the level of employer-employee relationship. They did not dwell much onto the strategic and other aspects. If you look at the UniZulu way it has been positioned and configured, there's a very strong institutional element. And in this slide, we thought let us just summarize the key elements, pillars that if you are able to have access and understanding and internalization of them, you're standing a very good chance to be in a better space to understand the system as it were. So performance management framework, I describe this document as a document which was prepared not to be shared generally and openly to the staff members. Not that it has got anything secretive, no, but it was shared so that it allows the university executive to have a formal document where they can think and dream as to how they want to engage performance management within the university. So whilst they've agreed that we'll start somewhere, given the spectrum of the maturity model, they also, at the time of engaging in high debate and interesting engagements, they thought some of the ideas should be parked. And that parking lot is, in this case, can be seen as performance management framework. As I said, the performance management framework does cover quite a long horizon spectrum of some of the things that university can embark on. And I do believe that the university executives are still keeping it alive, keeping it up to date. As a matter of fact, every year in February, the university executive, VC and his DVCs and some of the senior members will meet and review both the strategy as well as the adoption of performance management. During those times, at that time, that's when the opportunity of looking at the framework takes place as well. So that is one set of documents. Number two is a performance management policy, which we're able to look at this morning, which highlights the rationale, the legal framework, some of the key element of guidance. And I always suggest strongly that any aspect of how you want to engage, respond onto regarding performance management, the better place to start is not to ask, is rather to look at the policy. Because for its own way it has been designed, it can provide enough information and guidance for you to be able to maneuver as well as navigate this maze of performance management within the university. So make it your friend. If you are a line manager, even more so, because you are more likely to be asked questions by a subordinate. And those questions shouldn't find you wanting as to not able to deal with the responses that are required. I mean, as much as you can respond based on your general knowledge, but rather on the basis of what has been done at the university, please do provide an appropriate and accurate response, and the performance management policy is able to do that. Now, the process is not a very lengthy document, as it were, or discussion, but it's very practical to show us as to where we always want to start if we're engaging on the topic. We're going to look at it as well. The template, we're going to spend some time this afternoon and look at some templates, and then we're going to spend some time looking at a performance management body of knowledge as well. Now, maybe let me rephrase. Performance management body of knowledge, again, might not necessarily be a set of documents physically touched, but what we are emphasizing there is that for everything that we have been discussing, it is essential that it should be kept safely. So the total sum of all these documents, the strategic plan, the performance management framework, the policy document, the process, the template, and some of other elements that are able to assist need to be kept in a way that it can be preserved for knowledge management within the university. Because this is a journey. These documents, as we navigate, they do certainly change and take a different kind of shape. So it is expected that for us to be able to influence positive maturity in terms of performance management, the body of knowledge need not to be thin. And therefore, all what we are saying is here is that this set of documents, and let alone not me mentioning the performance management reference guide, which we've already covered earlier on, it essentially important is not on the screen, as well as the strategy document is not on the screen, as well as the operational plans for departments, those are not on the screen. So the total sum of all those linking to performance management essentially will assist us to develop a sustainable body of knowledge on the subject matter of performance management. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. We've already, by virtue of questions and putting in context, spoken very strongly about the institutional level. We've already spoken about the departmental level. We've already spoken about the individual performance level. When we do a practical session at the later stage, looking at the template, we are going to look at individual performance agreement as one of the templates. We're also going to look at individual performance assessment form as well. So I think Etienne can assist me later when we look at some of those. Etienne, if you still be around, just to have a much more practical discussion, and also some of the, should I say, and challenges you might have encountered in assisting our colleagues in adopting those templates. I'll cover the templates, and then I'll hand over to you, maybe just to talk about the practical scenarios that you tend to have a look encounter during the practical engagement on the same. If it's fine with you, I'll appreciate that.
That's fine with me.
Okay, great stuff. So in terms of now, so let me, if I were to paint a picture, the broader aspect of the scope of the performance management system, that has been covered in all our engagements since the morning. What we are ever doing now is we are refining and crystallizing some of these. So by refining and crystallizing some of these elements, we might be repeating what already has been said. It might be positioned in a different angle, but it's exactly the same aspect or the same thing that we are talking about. So just to help you so that you can be able to see various dimensions of how should I look at this phenomenon of performance management. So the element of integration was covered. Remember, we spoke about integration, looking at the vertical side of it, from executive planning down to individual planning. We also talk about integration in lieu of talking about the commitment by the institution in terms of providing resources, We also spoke about integration, talking about the institution providing commitment to develop employees. So this is another angle of looking at integration when you look at the whole system of performance management in sync. Now, as part of that, we are emphasizing certain key points without necessarily negating other points. So it's more a question of crystallizing, as I've mentioned. One of the steps we look at is established performance standard. So during our planning process, not only do we talk about KPAs and KPIs, inverted commas, for the sake of just talking about them, we also ensure that we use a certain method of establishing these standards. So how do you measure performance? And how would you measure someone or determine if someone has met the minimum requirements? How would you determine or ascertain if someone has exceeded minimum requirements? Or how would you determine or measure or indicate or ascertain if someone has underperformed? Because that should not necessarily be dependent on one's view. It should be dependent on something that has been established as we talk of performance standard, because we talk of that term quite often in the process of evaluation when you say, but you did not meet the standard. But the question is, what were the standards? And if those are not communicated clearly, they can obviously cause a lot of issues at the later stage when we try to find our ground as to what we are talking about. Number two, now that the standards have been established, the benchmarks have been established, the KPIs have been illustrated and outlined clearly, and all parties understand. The next point is to communicate them. As Jack Welch's quote, I've communicated the vision and strategy of this company so many times, even on the 100th time, someone was understanding it for the first time. It's only human nature. So as a manager, as a line manager, as a leader, and as an influential person within the organization, take it upon yourself to communicate. Yes, it might be too much if it's 100th time in practical terms, but you always need to remind your fellow subordinate to say, remember what we are geared for. Remember where we are heading. You always have to, because the time you stop, it's like watering the plants. The time you stop, they die. So part of the responsibility of the manager, supervisor, and as well as a line manager is to ensure exactly that kind of element of reminding people as to where we are heading. In this case, we are saying, remember what we are expecting you to do. It always happens. In the middle of the year, you ask people to do certain things and ask them how things are doing. They talk everything except what was agreed upon. Then you always have to say, but remember the agreement, because agreement serves the base or set the base of what we or you are going to be ascertained, measured, and or assessed on. So it's always important for one to be able to remind those people. Measure actual performance. Actual performance, one of our colleagues earlier on spoke about facts in terms of performance output. You'll see when we look at a performance assessment form, exactly what it's able to provide us and commentary that is able to be provided so that at least we know exactly what was achieved. It's not about the three and then we say, good, what was achieved? It's more, in fact, as you move more outer, be it on the exceeding or on the below achievement, that's where even much more commentary or narrative is required. Because if you say a person did not achieve, you better be able to explain what exactly that person not able to achieve. If a person has achieved, you ought to explain. If a person exceeded, you ought to explain. Now that explanation supports the element of fact or actual, so that at least we can all be able to say, okay, these documents, when they navigate the organizational corridors as part of data collection and submission to other levels, they don't come with you as a person who provided the feedback. They rather come with your narrative or your explanation. Therefore, it needs to appear on those documents. That is why when we measure support. If it means there's supporting documents, by all means. For an example, we speak of maybe general positions like an administrator or secretary or customer service person. Now, a customer service person on regular basis receives a lot of emails appreciating and thanking him or her for providing such a good service in dealing with some problems. Those emails can be used as supporting base to demonstrate how well that person has done his or her work. Even though the document, as it were, that does not stipulate that you have to attach, but you'll be able to explain that Sipho or Busiso or Tim, John or Jack, including Jean and many other people, they've done their work exceptionally well, and this is what they've achieved. Attached are some of the examples from customers who benefited, observed, or interacted with their work output. Because during the evaluation time, we're not going to call the customer to ask what John did in terms of output. It's a one-to-one. But John can bring a documentation from clients and other people whom he interacted with as his evidence of why he believes he met his performance levels. The opposite is also true. So if it means John, for some reasons, did not perform to the level of satisfactory, there has to be one way or the other at the basis of providing such evidence. Because if people were not happy about John and none of them made it vocal to his manager or to John himself, then John doesn't know. Jack Welch talked about Mary in this particular case. Mary doesn't know. How come are you saying only now I'm not doing well or I haven't been doing well? I've been here for 30 years. Not even a single bad email came. So the culture of providing feedback does assist in this particular case, so that as we sit, me and John, or John and me, or me and my manager, or whoever sit in that kind of a one-to-one session, we don't only argue based on what I think. Let us also support our positioning. Hence, we talk about measure actual performance. I'm quick to say organizational maturity levels will never be the same. In a case where we might be at a very level which is not as matured, one or below, some of these practices of providing documentation might not necessarily be known as something that could be done. But I am saying, as we mature, we need to take note of what bring consistent reference to what we are dealing with. That is why issues of document can be made use of. Candor, as it was practiced at GE, allows anyone to be able to write and say, thank you very much for what you have done. I appreciate it. It helped me quite a lot. Someone can put it and file it somewhere. Because that's exactly what a person felt at the time of being provided that kind of a service or any kind of assistance as an employee. So that kind of openness, transparency, appreciation is important. Because if it means it's going to be dependent only on the manager's experience, it's obviously going to be an issue. And I'm very clear as to when we talk about work output, there are only two people who sit in there, a manager, a line manager, as well as a subordinate. No other third persons. However, the documentation that is presented by other third persons can be utilized as evidence to obviously support the level of achievement or lack thereof. So we know the standard, we know the performance now, we compare. If it means the system was in place, you'll literally be able just to say, based on the standard, it was 1 or X, and the actual performance is Z, the difference is this. It would have been as simple as that. But because we know this is not about numbers game, the number is just an interpretation of some qualitative content that you would have gone through. You don't start with the number, but you end with the number. Everything else is built from explanation, and I'm talking about supporting documents. Once we've got all the necessary documents and or supporting elements to say, now I've measured, I've also compared, then I can be able to rate. It does not start with rating and then go backwards to justify it. Now, it might be a very minute or a small point, but it makes a huge difference. Start by providing supporting basis and explanation, and then apportion a necessary indicating rating of what we are talking about. Openness and discussions are encouraged to discuss this, not employees amongst themselves, between an employee and a line manager. It does not mean you don't have to discuss. I mean, obviously in a team, you can put on the dashboard or on some form of a screen up there to show employees who is relatively performing better in the environment where they're at. You can't hide that. You shouldn't hide that. But it does not mean you need to just to discuss one employee's performance with another. It is between you and the employee. but the reflection of how every one of us is doing need to be shared. And that is why we talk of things like leaderboard. Don't hide it. The manager of the month, don't hide it. The best employee of the month, don't hide it. The best employee in the organization, don't not hide it. Because in a way, it shows other employees what happens if you are performing well. Obviously, you don't want to name and shame those who are not, because then you're going to be destroying some other people. So the level of openness and transparency can be utilized. Performance management is not science, it's an art. And in art, there's creativity and innovation. And I do believe that once we all internalize exactly what we're dealing with, in each department, within the parameters of UNIZU performance management system, you can then improvise and say, okay, now that I am within this, I don't have any budget, I don't have to provide any financial related kind of motivation, but I can certainly recognize my staff. Once in a while, we are all sit together, monthly, weekly, not weekly, monthly, quarterly, and we all contribute 50, 50, 50, 50 rands, and we all sit and go and buy some eats. And on that day, we're all going to share who has been the best performer. Does it mean you need budget? No. Does it mean you need approval from another senior manager? No. But it's something you can do within your department. I mean, there are secret ballots that people do in some organizations and some departments where we want to keep the level of competition amongst ourselves. So during the performance rating official one, I'm not going to be seeking input from another person necessarily, but I'll be considering any other supporting document that you'll provide. But during the month-to-month engagement, I will do my own secret ballot with my staff members where they will all nominate who they think is best performing or demonstrating certain good values. Now, those things do not really need to be done within the ambit of the policy, but they need to acknowledge the fact that they are within the element of what the organization does promote. So I'm not sure whether I'm coming across clear there to say innovation can be utilized. We don't have to wait for big things. We don't have to wait for big celebrations. We can certainly do our own things within departments. It depends on the manager as to how you want to encourage. It depends on the supervisor as to how you want to motivate and so forth and so forth. So there are issues or areas of innovation that can certainly be taken advantage to. We had been talking about various contributors, role players, and stakeholders. In this case, we're going to focus on three main ones. One is HR, represented by the HR department, as well as business partners. We're going to be talking about the supervisor and the line manager. Then we're going to be talking about employee himself or herself. So let's look at what are some of the key roles of human resource department in terms of implementing and adoption of performance management system. Firstly, they're obviously custodians of the human resource policy. All policies that we have shared, including the legislative framework in terms of HR, is available at HR. So should you have any questions as to what can be, what should be, and how you could go to HR to find out some of that particular guidance. Number two, performance management system itself. Beyond our engagement today, feel free to say, I did hear the consultant speak. I did hear his own version of how he illustrated the point with regards to PMS, but there are certain fundamental questions I'm encountering in my own division. I didn't want to take the linen and put it outside there, probably in talking to the consultant or with the consultant, but I do have some fundamental question. Can you help me? HR should be able to help you in that particular case. The delivery of training to all, including new employees, including managers and so forth, HR should be able to provide that on the subject of performance management. Orientation of new employees, as well as keeping all the records that are available, provided, developed in terms of performance management. Now, when we do skills audits in organizations, we do ask a question whether do we have sufficient records where we can be able to ascertain the level of performance of employees. Because if it means an organization wants to conduct skills audit, certainly amongst other reasons will be to address issues of performance. So we asked, do we have documents of performance for at least the last 4 cycles of performance reviews or assessment? Because then at least 4 cycles would give us a very good trend. That might be 2 every year for the past 2 years, that means 4. Okay, or for those that do 4 in a year, that is good enough to see. So in that case, we can be able to develop a trend and say, okay, each of these employees seemingly have been consistently showing a downturn or an upturn or a stagnation through issues of performance as it is done within the organization. So that is on another subject. However, but the role of HR to keep those records become very important, if not fundamental. The second one is the supervisor or line manager. So this is a person who is seen as an agent of a department, depending which level he is at or she is at. An agent representative of the department. Now, a department has got a mandate, and that mandate needs to be achieved by all employees who are assigned to the department. So a leader is therefore a line manager with some of his supervisors or team leaders, as it were. So amongst other things, the supervisor needs to be able to ensure that he assists with is to provide job description. Not in terms of document only, but in terms of explaining, because we can read and see, okay, see it's written, but what does it mean? The supervisor should be able to explain that within the reasons of understanding the job. Whilst HR can assist to keep the records, but the person who understands the technical aspect of the job, indeed, is the supervisor. Facilitate the compilation of performance management agreement. The question is, who initiates the process of performance management compilation? The answer is the line manager. The answer is the line manager. Because HR stipulates when do we need to receive all performance agreements that have been formulated by end of February, by end of January, on the specific time dates and so forth. All what HR is waiting for are those signed agreements. The line manager needs to initiate and call an employee so that they can sit together to discuss and agree and then sign. However, in a case of disagreements, then obviously HR can be brought in to say, guys, please help us. We are not fighting, but we don't see some of these things the same way. Is there a way you can assist us to get clarity? Then HR will be able to provide the assistance. Review of performance for an incumbent, line manager is supposed to do that. In this case, I'm not saying initiate, I'm saying review. So line manager should be part of the review team when we do a 360 feedback review. Line manager should also be part of the two, line manager and an incumbent, when they do work output assessment. So line manager should always feature in terms of providing an input in terms of performance, as we're gonna see going forward. Number 6, in terms of holding an employee accountable for development. Because when we agree on the PDP, we don't just say an employee must see it to itself, because this employee will need time off to go and attend some of the courses. This employee will need some financial resources to pay for courses. And this employee would also need other aspects of support. That is why it is important that the manager holds the employee accountable, that we have a plan for you to develop yourself. Are you aligning to such? Because an employee will ask, say, we've agreed to develop me, but it seems as if you're not supporting me to do the same. So without necessarily suggesting that managing your manager is not important or ideal, what we are saying here, it should be a line manager who takes an initiative to facilitate the process of development. At least the employee can then move from there. And again, I'm not saying you should do this. I'm just saying, as a line manager, there should be a responsibility of observing whether the employee is developing according to the PDP. Recognition, both in terms of recognizing negative, providing constructive feedback, and recognizing positive and encouraging an employee to maintain the superior performance, is part of the manager's responsibility. Coach, guide employees. If a manager is not a coach or not trained to be a coach, it becomes essential for a manager to actually expose himself onto the coaching techniques. Because to be a manager does not mean we know it all. It just means we occupy a position. So help yourself to acquire some of the skills. Jack Welch says, the day you become a manager, change must happen. Because it's a day you start to realize that you will win, not because of yourself, but because of others. So point 8 then emphasizes the point that you need to work harder to encourage others, because through them you become a winner. It's no longer about yourself as much as it would if you are not a supervisor or a line manager. So these are the 8 responsibilities of a line manager in terms of performance management, or assisting and facilitating the environment. Looking at the responsibility of the employee, as he a very important stakeholder, it is about him, so he has to, or she has to, take part as well. So first thing, or one of the things, is to ensure that you understand the policy framework. You cannot say, no, my manager will explain to me what this is all about. You need to take charge of understanding. Hence, everyone gets orientated onto the system, not managers, but everyone. That's number one. Number two, you need to make sure that you bother yourself to understand what is expected of me, be it from the job profile or from the performance agreement. Because if you treat those documents as just documents that will be signed and be filed, it shouldn't come as a surprise at a later stage when you realize that what you did, not only was it below par, it was not even part of what was supposed to be a priority. And it happens in organizations. It happens every single day. We're engulfed by the moments, and we keep on doing things, and we keep on doing things until find that when a person simply asks, what you are doing now, show me where is it onto a performance agreement. And in the absence of you able to do the link or provide the link or illustrate, it obviously becomes a problem. So make sure that you are aware of what is expected from you. Participate in the process of compiling performance agreement, both in terms of KPIs from the job profile, stipulating the threshold, the benchmarks, and the yardstick of management. Also participate in the compilation of PDP, personal development plan. Engage in personal professional development activities. Whilst the manager need to facilitate, you need not to wait. You need to take charge of, we agreed that you're going to develop me on this. Now I'm at the stage where I need to attend a workshop, a course. Can I get leave accordingly? Can I book myself in? Can I be supported financially or any other aspect? Because this is your career, this is your development, and this is your ability that will be improved. Now, point number 6 is very important, and we're going to demonstrate it a bit when we move on to the next section or the next couple of slides. Like I indicated, using a golf game as an example, each and every golf player has got a scorecard in his or her pocket and a pen that she or uses to actually keep the score. There's no referee that will sit on top of the highest tree and observe all the field of players playing, because it's going to be close to impossible. So if you cheat in golf, you're standing a chance of being penalized. And a lot of golfers do try and cheat, especially the professional golfers. There's TV cameras and everything. You move your ball illegally, you drop your ball in the wrong place and in the wrong way. At the later stage, you submit your score, they ask you what happened there, you explain, then they penalize you, because at least they know that you were there. In other sporting code, without getting into details and digressing into sport, becomes slightly different. As long as the referee does not see, I can do anything. So performance management is more like a golf sport as opposed to other team sport where no one is carrying a scorecard. Everyone just wants to play. And as best as they can, they will cheat for all they care. So performance management system or performance management is rather different than the other kind of sport in terms of illustration. So as an employee, you need to make it an effort that you don't become a subject. You, however, become a contributor. So you sit and say, fair to myself, I did not do well. Fair to myself, I messed up here, I messed up here, I messed up here. And if you are fair to yourself, you can even go to your manager and say, sir, oh, ma'am, can you please help me? I'm struggling to do what is supposed to be done here. How can I be assisted? So if you know your weaknesses are up front, you can then go on to prepare yourself to improve. 12 months is a very long time. I still don't understand in my own small world as why, as an employee, at the end of 12 months, you have been found to have underperformed. If you knew exactly what was expected from you, you had an agreement, assuming the environment was there for you to assist you. If the environment was detrimental to you and your manager and other things were not supportive, I'm withdrawing my statement of I don't know why. But as I'm saying, when we plan and we engage on this, we assume the best. That is why when we discuss, someone can say, but my environment is not as ideal as you are saying, Stembis. How can I then maneuver in such? Because at least as we're in class, we can share some ideas. Lack of sharing of these ideas or not taking advantage of this will mean you'll accept whatever it is out there. That's number one. Number two, I'm talking of not a situation where things are stagnant. I'm talking about a situation where things are continuously improving. Now, what becomes important with this discussion as we go along is that one day you might be an employee now, you might be a line manager now, but one day you become a very influential person in your own company or in somebody else's company or in an institution. Some of what we are covering and doing and talking about might just help you at that time. So maybe for now it might be seen, I can't do everything you are saying because I'm disadvantaged. I don't have powers, no authority. It's okay. It's understandable. This is not a one shoot kill all kind of a situation. It's a journey we are talking about engaging in so that at least we can capacitate each other and capacitate ourselves for the betterment of performance management engagement and journeys as we navigate through this particular system. So I'm not necessarily saying if you don't do this thing, then you'll be dead. Certainly, there will be things that won't go necessarily right, but in the most of them, it will assist you in future, short future, or probably the longer distant future when you are in positions of authority. But for the University of Zululand, as we speak, we already know that this is being done. It is expected that you do performance agreement at least on time. It is expected that as a line manager, you provide feedback at least within the element of templates and philosophy that has been shared, at least understanding why it is being done, at least understanding what is supposed to be achieved. Over the period of time, then we can be able to certainly improve the way things are being done so that we can also be better in what we do. So in the quest of saying all that, the question is, what are the processes that need to be followed? Particularly in a process of an annual cycle where we start by looking at the strategy plan. As I've indicated, every year before any individual agreements are submitted, the organizational executive would have been somewhere where they relook at the strategy, reassure as to where we are focusing on, and that will be cascaded to departmental, point number two, and after departmental, it will be cascaded to individual performance agreements. Those obviously will be signed after being compiled, and we are able to use them as a part of execution. So after the execution periods, and I'm saying in this case, not the formal ones, both the formal and informal one, it could be monthly, it could be quarterly, it could be mid-term one or mid-year one, there will be evaluation of performance that will be undertaken. As much as an agreement does have a PDP enshrined onto it or included into it, after the evaluation, you go back and say, can we do something to assist you? That is why point number 5 becomes instrumental to say development plans or develop plans to address gaps that would have been established as a result of performance evaluation. And that will be upon an employee and a line manager to undertake those personal development plans. It could be coaching, it could be mentorship, it could be on-the-job training, it could be formal short courses, it could be exposure to other environments like conferences, seminars, or it could be using a mentor externally, or it could be using a qualification certificate or any other form of educational intervention that can assist an employee to develop and grow. That's point number 6. So during the spectrum of the year, we are then able to do 2 evaluations at least, which are formal within the University of Zululand, and then we're going to have a final score in the final assessment rather at the end of the year. As to what happens with the final assessment, and I'm not trying to pour cold water on this, but the university management from time to time can make it its own prerogative at what it embark on. Now, the policy do make certain articulations, and as I've mentioned earlier on, the performance management framework goes even further. You might find that early enough, the VC has got a VC award. For example, the Reserve Bank, I used to be there some years back, there used to be Governor's Award. Simple, Governor's Award, 1 employee or 2, it happened very rare, though, to say one or two employees will be nominated from departments at the end of the year during this time, November. The governor will say, this year, 2020, the best employee, based on what we have received, all nominations, is this person. A trophy, a photo with the governor, as well as a small check at the time. I don't know what is the practice now, and a big certificate. So everyone will be looking upon the governor's award. Those who receive awards will be taken their photos, and then they are available at 28th floor at the Reserve Bank building, where you can see that the history seeks to show that there was this kind of a person who was a award winner for the governor. So it does not break the bank of the institution, but it becomes a cultural thing, which is obviously done well enough. There are fewer employees within the bank, so you can go away with that. But even before you are being nominated or appointed as a governor winner, you probably might be a winner in your department. So that means if there are 7 departments, there'll be 7 winners in those departments. So it's not a bad exercise at the end of the day. So that is why I'm saying after 7, it depends on the organizational prerogative and executive as to what they do to encourage the culture of excellent performance. That is why it does not appear as a fixed step in the process. It is highly encouraged that it should be done, but it's not a mandatory thing. Performance management is not science, it's an art. And in art, there is creativity and innovation. So if the executives are really committed, they will go beyond just collecting the scores and keeping the records of what the scores are. They will go beyond that, because that data they possess and what they have can actually assist the organization in so many ways, because we are aiming to become a best institution in terms of learning. So if we look at the process and break it further down, then we can look at some of the sub elements of it, starting with the level of institutional, develop group strategy plan or institutional strategy plan, which is done once for 5 years in this particular case. And it does certain things which are important. Now, as an ordinary employee, it should not necessarily be hidden from you as to what is our strength, weaknesses as an institution, because this is a reflection on you. We are not a good research publishing institution, so if there is a weakness or they create an opportunity. So what I'm trying to say, those contexts of organizational SWOT analysis are needed to be known by almost all of us. The strategic goals and objective, SG1, SGSO1, you can see our university strategy. There are those unique identifiers and acronyms. SG1 is SG1 for the next 5 years. If you look at all the documentation, strategic goal 1 is uniquely defined. It doesn't change. So that means you can be able to track and see of the 6 key strategic objectives and goals for 2015 to 2021, what are those that have been achieved and to what extent? That is at the level of the strategic management. On annual basis, that is reviewed. Obviously, there's a report that seeks to indicate what has been achieved. Other external stakeholders, the DHEAD, the council, and others will then be able to say, okay, we are comfortable about what you are achieving. At least you can be remunerated, and I'm using the remuneration loosely if it means that what they've agreed upon, or we've noted what we have achieved, period. So between the institution and the powers that be, they can agree on mechanisms of acknowledging, encouraging such kind of output that they would have obtained. But the document, safe to say, becomes a guiding document which shows us clearly where we are heading and where we should be focusing on. At the second level, we talk about a departmental operational plan, which does the same at an institutional level, but focusing in a particular department or particular unit. The same should be shared with the participants or employees in that particular department, because it's a reflection on them. In this department, we not seem to be performing very well. It's not the line manager in the department or HOD. It's not the secretary who's sitting at the door receiving people and receiving correspondences in terms of delivered letters and post. It's everyone in that department who contribute towards what end up being known that department as, or what end up being known that department for. So it's important that it is being shared or should be shared with everyone else, so that the reflection of its output, good or bad, should be owned by its participants, in this particular case, employees. At the level of individual level, yourself and the manager, on annual basis, you sit and review your performance agreement. By the time we get to the review stage, you can actually do it with your eyes closed. Because if you have done your plan well, you can know where did you not do well and why did you not do well. Both videos of Jack Welch and of the Actor Software presentation on performance management that ask why performance management is important. They say eliminate surprises. No one likes surprises. If I've been working with you and I've been underperforming based on your own views and you did not tell me until the review session, then I would think, okay, maybe you were excited if I wasn't performing well because you wanted to catch me. Not that I wasn't seeing it, but I suppose if I'm not doing that well, take me to task early enough so that I can have an opportunity to correct myself. As I said earlier on, I still don't understand why someone will emerge as underperformer at the end of 12 months, even 11 months, if he knew or if she knew what he or she will be assessed on. Unless if there are other factors that I'm probably not looking at or taking into cognizance of. Let me check our time in terms of how we're doing. I'm gonna skip this short video. We're gonna come back and look at it later, so that at least I want us to finish this part so that when we look at the video, it assists us to look at some other aspects. So we're gonna look at it just before we talk about underperformance. So the systems within a system, when we look at KPAs and KPIs, how best to define them? Because it's easy just to come up with a very long string of sentences and written language about what is it that we are measuring. When we introduced performance management system within Unizulu, we, as I've indicated earlier on, we adopted a system TMA method, which comes with a library of competencies, behavioral examples, depending on 4 levels. Level 1 below will be general level. Level 2 will be operational level. Level 3 will be tactical level. And then level 4 will be strategic level. So the framework of competencies covers those aspects. So each competency definition, what exactly it means, what are behavioral examples according to the level an employee occupies. That's number 1. On the other side, the same library comes with 23 KPAs, already with pre-definition of exactly what it means and defined in a way using a SMART approach. Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. So time-based, relevant, attainable, measurable, and specific, those are aspects that we bring into our discussion when we want to check whether a particular KPA, is it really stipulated clearly enough for us to be able to determine whether at some stage it was achievable or not. So it's not about just writing a sentence, it's about writing a meaningful KPA so that it can be standardized. So that's why when we talk of library, the library has got best practice in terms of how a KPA need to be looked at. Number 1. Number 2, we discourage quite a lot of having anyone coming up with a KPA in an institution. So when we talk about the maturities in a capability maturity model, there are certain factors that you can embark on or employ to assist maturity. One of them is a repository, as we've spoken in terms of the library. So better be that HR spend time investing in effort in defining common KPAs. And I'm saying common because you can, if you know the institution or environment well enough, you can come up with common KPAs. Those KPAs can be used universally within an institution. So you can start with certain levels. Any senior level, from senior level up, you can, what are the most appropriate KPAs that are used to define their deliverables in terms of the work they do? You can even define by the sector or subsector within an institution. Can we have KPAs for academics? Can we have KPA for general workers? Can we have, now those will be stored and kept at the library. So that means next time when you come up with a job profile one, as well as a job, performance agreement. You don't have to scratch your head and say, okay, so how should we put this now? You go deep, find out what is there. In an exceptional case where it is not there, at least there's a trace of how a KPA needs to be formulated. A smart approach assists in that particular case, not just for us to talk about it, but for us to guide us as to how best we need to be able to do this particular thing. Now, conducting a performance appraisal, we've done the planning, we've done an agreement, people have worked, the people have signed the agreement, people know exactly what is expected from them and everything that comes along with it. Timelessly, be it end of the month or end of the quarter or end of the year or end of the midterm, now it's time for us to do appraisal / reviews. What happens? When we focus on work output element, remember there's work output, there's competencies, behavioral examples, then there's values. There are three set of element of performance that can be embarked on. Even though some of the videos that we've looked at did talk about values, and we earlier on spoke about behavioral examples, which are competencies, it is safe to say that within the university, the current version of performance management focuses only or in the main on work output. Etienne, I hope that hasn't changed as yet. We're still focusing mainly on the work output kind of performance levels. The other element two, which I've covered, which are also in the policy, have not been included for formal assessment. If I can just get an indication from you on that one.
Yes, you are correct.
Okay. So what we are therefore looking at is a work output assessment base, where step number one, we know when we should be submitting performance assessment. Firstly, the HR department does put big kind of posters and remind people via emails that now we are on the 30th, so by the 15th of November, next month, we should have submissions of performance assessments. So that is known by an employee and a line manager. Now, an employee can start assessing himself by completing an assessment form, which is available publicly to say, let me assess how I did, because now we're looking at the formal assessment period. In an assessment form, as you're gonna see it, there is a KPA, there are activities, and against each activity, there will be KPIs. That is how the form was designed, and again, in practice, we can see how well that is actually happening. So when you rate against a KPI. As part of rating against the KPI, then you provide supporting information as to what indeed was achieved or what was not achieved, if it means the rating is of a negative aspect. -3 being met requirements, 2.5, 2, 1, those inverted commas, I'm using a language of negative because they suggest that you did not meet. 3.5, 4, 4.5, and 5, those are on the positive because they suggest you've actually exceeded the minimum threshold. So confirm the output delivered in each KPA on the form is provided and allocate a necessary rating per activity. You do that on your own as an employee, not that you are waiting for the manager. As a matter of fact, with the way I'm saying it, you can do this every month so that at least you are clear as to where you are standing. Side by side, the line manager, knowing the deadline for submission, should be starting that. So that means as soon as we know what is the due date for submission, the line manager can send an email to all staff members. Ladies and gentlemen, you are aware that performance assessment reports are required by the 15th of November. I would appreciate if you can start completing yours so that I can schedule one-on-one meeting with you from the 5th to the 10th of November. Simple email, people are aware, they start doing that. Come 5th of November, then people are scheduled in meetings with, which is part of our point number 3 on this model. This meeting is scheduled, an employee knows exactly what is going to be discussed. Both an employee and a line manager have completed the form separately. They are now bringing both of those forms to an extent that if you are a manager that applies condo or practice condo, openness, transparency, and sincerity, you can say to your employee, send me your version of assessment I will send me my version of assessment so that when we sit in that meeting, we just discuss exceptional differences or variations, should I call it. You meet in the meeting one-on-one, you discuss performance ratings, you achieve the agreement, you sign the performance agreement. Bang, Bob is your uncle. It sounds simple. Of course it is, because it was supposed to be as simple as that. It is only us who complicate this thing. One, we don't do it on time. We do it too late. By the time we do it, we rush. Two, we don't do it with sincerity. We do it for the sake of ticking a box. By the time, it does not mean anything. Three, obviously, we don't provide objective feedback. Everyone wants to cheat. Like I'm saying in sport, in golf, if you cheat, you'll be penalized. As much as in other open sport or team sport, obviously, if you cheat, you also get penalized. But in this particular case, people want to twist things around and try to manipulate the end goal so that at least they can benefit, even unduly so. I'm suggesting, I'm not saying you individually do that, but I'm suggesting if these things are done with those motives, they end up being tick boxes or what you call lip service, as opposed for them to be done sincerely. Now, I do know that one can argue and say, but Stemi, so we do this in our institution, but nothing is done with it. I'm calling for multiple levels of interaction. We spoke about that as integration. The departmental head, the HOD, or the manager in a particular unit can do almost everything with this kind of data without having to depend on the executives. Because where you are given authority to be in charge of these staff members, I do believe with this policy as well as this system in place, you've got everything that you need. So there's no need to wait for executive to do something magical. There's no need to wait for the what you call governor equivalent to do something magical. In your own department, you can do everything to recognize, acknowledge, support, coach, and motivate your staff members. And this system, as long as it's authorized, it can be of use to you at the level where you are at. I'm saying this both openly to employees as well as line managers, because there's no magic that needs to be pulled to come up with grandstanding. In this case, it's not about grandstanding, it's about really ensuring that we are providing impetus, positive, I must add, to employees for them to perform. So with the 12 points based on Gallup and research, you can choose any of those and say, for me as a line manager, I want to focus on these 4. I'm not going to wait for the institutional. I'm going to pursue my own so that at least I'm in line with the engagement of a staff member. The parameters of us conducting performance in this institution has been done. It is there. We've been trained. We've been orientated. So what I need to do is just to take it forward and run with it. But it becomes difficult, as I've mentioned earlier on, if this feeling comes from employees, in other words, subordinates, and the manager does not support it. It's always better if a manager and a line manager, probably someone with authorities, support this, because then it can be easily done because of the level of support coming from that person. If it comes from the bottom, it's more like one hitting himself against a hard rock. Because if a manager does not see any need to practice this in a way and a manner that can benefit the organization, it obviously becomes difficult. That's why the dynamics of the institution are nothing to be shied away from, because indeed they do add a factor, a positive or negative, in the quest of what we are trying to talk about. So I'm not trying to beautify this thing. I'm not trying to make it fun. I'm not trying to make it as simple. I'm not trying to make it doable without any challenges. I'm trying to level a context by saying, in a situation whereby we're all sincere, transparent, and genuine in our conduct and act, we should not find any obstacles. But in a situation where we try to cheat, beat the system, manipulate, and earn undue rewards of it, obviously, you'll find that favoritism start to kick in, and so forth and so forth and so forth. So for all intents and purposes, there's nothing wrong with the system. Yes, acknowledging the level of maturity, but the system has nothing wrong with it. It's probably about how we do it and embark on it ourselves as role players and custodians in the environment. So one, stipulate an indication of below performance standard, and there is an explanation. So in the absence of standard being defined, there's going to be an issue in terms of establishing whether was indeed below or not. Two, below average. In other words, often than not, there was a situation whereby one did not meet. One means consistently. So in most cases, on that particular AKPA, on that particular task, let me start with the task. In that particular task you performed, in most cases, or consistently rather, you were not able to meet the minimum requirements by far. On the number two, on average, in some cases, but in some cases you were able to. Three, on most cases you met. Three, you met. Nothing special, you just met. Four, there was signs of exceeding. There was those sparks of exceeding that this person given an opportunity, time and support, he can do much better, but he definitely has surpassed the minimum requirements. And five means on exceptional basis, consistently you were just hitting the mark, hitting the score. So on all these bases, on all these cases, it is suggested that for any score or rating rather allocated, for any rating allocated, there need to be a supporting kind of indicator, supporting kind of narrative, or supporting kind of descriptor. At least in that way, you are able then to balance it out and say, if two people, if not three, were assigned to do more or less similar job by virtue of a title, how come both of them, they acquire the same rating, even though the supporting elements are completely different? I'll leave that open for one to be able to respond to it, because I don't want to open a can of worms. But the fact of the matter is, does it happen in some cases whereby the performance output were comparable, but the rating assigned to it is rather different? So on day-to-day engagement with the line managers and employees, or employees and line managers, these are some of the things that we are promoting. Discuss open and often. Don't wait for too long without discussing performance. A monthly once is good enough. Provide feedback to appreciate, recognize. Or if you are not appreciating, but at least do recognize that the person is not pulling through, because recognize does not always say positive. You can recognize negative and give that positive feedback to that person. Address concerns and solve problems. Check progress. Make mid-course adjustments where necessary. There was a question, if there's additional tasks or activities assigned to me during the course of the year, how should we deal with that? Go back and revise the performance agreement so that it can be meaningful as part of the engagement guideline we have for that particular year. We spoke about coaching, we spoke about mentorship. We said not all managers are able to provide the same coach and mentor, but it is expected that at least they can develop themselves, because in the area where you might be at, leading and managing staff members, you need to understand persons and people's languages. So dialogue should not be monologuous. In other words, allow people to speak, someone to speak, and you listen, you respond, and vice versa, as opposed to you just pushing through and lambasting a person. So obviously, in terms of how often it should be, it's your call. The company or the university says at least twice a year on the formal level, but on informal level, it can be as many as it could be. Address strengths as well as concerns, sincerity, collegial, respect each other in the process. Don't look upon one as a senior, don't look upon one as inferior, and probably disrespect. Do it in a way, in a manner that can be beneficial to both of you with that kind of respect. Pay attention. Those that are doing great work, do let them know that they are doing great work. They deserve to know. Do they deserve to be paid more than what their salaries dictate? I don't know. I can't talk about that, but at least I do know that words on their own can do a lot of good to recognize someone's contribution and ability in terms of work and attributes of performance that is being demonstrated. Results is what we are for, so don't shy away from good results. You can also make even examples as Stembiso is a very good person, or Joe is a very good person. Look upon him in terms of how he does it. Does it mean you are creating a bad blood amongst employees? No. Those who might take offense because of that, obviously they will have a problem. But if you are showing really sincerity in terms of how one is doing, don't be shy to make an example. Celebrate success. You don't have to spend too much. You can buy a pizza that can be shared by the whole lot of people, and that's just a question of celebrating success amongst other a spectrum or other engagements. In terms of the paradigm, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. All the new paradigm in terms of performance management, you can look at that probably in your slide and engage on it. Now, I would like us to look at dealing with underperformance, because it's one area I alluded earlier on to say, not only is the judgment from line manager need to be left unchallenged, but the legislative framework becomes a very good guide as to what you can do in dealing with underperformance. One of the things that one needs to know is that you should not ignore an underperforming employee. Mary's situation, 36 years in a company, no one ever told Mary is not performing. Year 37, things are bad. You want to cut off your staff, you start with her. Mary, you never did well. Oh, how come you didn't tell me? It does not mean every time if you give feedback of not performing so well, you hate an employee or you mean to want to penalize that employee. I don't think so, but maybe some employees might not necessarily be aware. And that's why I'm saying I don't think so. Why wouldn't be if you are really not underperforming? So, but if you are dealing with professionals, as we are in our environment, one should be aware and the person should be aware. As long as the standards of performance benchmark have been set, it shouldn't be a problem to show that you are not. There are a lot of aspects, smart approach. You deliver things late. The level of quality was found wanting, substandard. It couldn't be utilized to the benefit, and so forth and so forth and so forth. And in the process, you can obviously show and assist an employee accordingly. So some of the reasons for underperformance can include these, and these are not exhaustive by any chance, but these are some that we believe are obvious. One, complexity of the job or assignment. It's just a tough job to do. Maybe because I'm really not clued up. I've never had any experience, so I find it very difficult to do. Or it might be because I'm not qualified by virtue of a training, orientation, or qualification, or including experience. It's out of my depth, so I find myself not performing according to required levels. Even though supportive and unsupportive or unfriendly environment might be a factor, obviously one will have to qualify why the environment makes you not performing. If it means the manager does not provide the resources required, you don't have tools of trade, of course, that can be a legitimate reason why one is underperforming. But by friendly, we don't mean relationship, just laugh at each other, smile with each other, and enjoy coffee. We mean much more elements of an environment, as we had spoken about earlier on. If an employee is not committed to the work, I mean, they are good employees, but they are not committed. That is when probably to a certain extent, Jack West talk about good performance, bad values, out. Good values, bad performance, give a person a chance. It all depends. Because if you are a kind of an employee that makes sure that on Mondays you are not being seen, that means Monday somebody has to fill in for you because you are not there and your position you occupy is a position that requires you to be on the phone, customer service or receptionist, and you are not there. It obviously creates a certain aspect. Being absent is a very bad thing. It's not only a behavioral, it's also about the output, because there's no output you are able to deliver in your absence. More so if you do it regularly, then it becomes a bit of an issue. Misinterpretation of scores, and again, that might be rare if everyone is orientated accordingly as we are doing. Everyone needs to be able to know, okay, that if it means I need to rate myself, 1 means what, 5 means what. So I shouldn't be confused. I shouldn't necessarily have a performance rating ultimately that looks that bad purely because I did not understand how to use the system. So that's what we mean there. It might be a reason, and I hope not often enough. Unclear expectations from an employer, or unclear or changing expectation. Whilst we are focusing on going this direction, there's a complete change, 360 to go another direction. and you are unable to complete any of the outputs required, and you are therefore accused of not delivering on time. That can be a problem. So we are saying not because all employees want to underperform, but there's some reasons why they do not. And unless if a manager spends time sitting one-on-one and seek to understand what contributes to underperformance be. And then once we know what contributes to underperformance, embark on rehabilitative intervention that can assist the employee. In no time going forward, we might find that we're able to improve in our quest to become better of who we are or of who we intend to become. So these are all some of the elements of dealing with underperformance. Obviously, one will be keen to know each practical circumstances of how some of these things are being seen, understood, or being done in environment so that you can be able to deal with it accordingly. Now, we have said with the employee, or the employee has said with the line manager, you've unpacked the issue of underperformance, you've understood some of the reasons. The question is, what are some of the most probable solutions in dealing with underperformance? Some, not all. One, formal training. I spoke about it. Short courses. Adopt on-the-job coaching and mentorship. Demotion. Rather allocate someone to a job position which he or she can deal with. On-the-job training or apprentice. Change position for the employee or transfer to another position, including an employee applying for another position herself. Termination of employment. The bottom 10, let go. In this case of Jack Welch's situation. So these are some of the solutions that can be dealt with. Indeed, termination of employment is a solution because within the ambit of the law, it is permitted to be utilized if you have exhausted all other options. Not victimization. When you terminate employment, you are not victim. You are dealing with the situation as it happens. We are providing a legitimate solution. Of course, demotion being one, but probably termination being the last straw, if I were to put it. 10 to 2. What I would like to do is quickly check the short video, the one I spoke about, so that we can see how it deals with issues of effective performance planning. And then after that, we can then look at the practical cases where we observe the templates that we have within our organization. And we're obviously going to reflect on that. And I'm going to afford Etienne an opportunity to reflect based on what we've covered and some of the practicals as we usher new employees onto our work place so that at least they can be aware of some of these. And then we can then take a pause to check the progress. And should we have covered everything, then we can close off as we are scheduled to finish.
If you're feeling concerned about giving up performance.
So I just want to check before I allow the video to go through. Can you see the video? Can you hear the audio?
Can hear the audio only, not the video.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Let me then correct that. Let's do that. I hope you can see it now, the video.
Yes.
Okay, great. Again, the same kind of pattern. Let us look and take some basic notes we can use to reflect on this, and then we can then take it from there.
Review to an employee. Don't worry, because you aren't alone. This video is for you. Hi, my name is Scott Morris. I'm the Chief HR Officer here at the University of Colorado Boulder, and in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to help you to make sense of the stuff that really makes a difference. It's the people, and HR is here to help you make a difference with each one of them. You know, over the course of my career in HR, I've been an advisor to just about every level of management. And I've been asked the same question again and again. What magic words can I use to make my employees' performance evaluation go smoothly? I've been asked variants of that question by staff managers and by faculty supervisors. Now, while it's true that there are more effective and less effective ways of presenting a performance eval, the truth is that those who are most successful find that success long before the actual conversation with the employee takes place. Those who achieve the most success do so because they're really good at creating the performance plan. In fact, It's pretty clear that if a supervisor invests the time and energy required to have a great performance plan, and then spends the time throughout the year engaged in an ongoing conversation with her employee, the evaluation almost always goes smoothly, strengthens the working relationship, and requires very little effort. So here's 3 things to keep in mind. First, share the ownership. Baseball great Yogi Berra was fond of saying that baseball is 90% mental, the other half is physical. In the spirit of that idea, a great manager instinctively realizes that her mindset is almost everything in management. Are you the owner and the employee is just the worker? Or are you partners, co-owners who play different but equally important roles, both jointly invested in the outcome? The way that you think about your relationship with your employee will be either the root of your success or your future difficulty. As the boss, you'll always have the responsibility for making the tough calls about strategy and direction. But from the beginning, do everything within your ability to build the employee's sense of investment. Rather than setting employee goals that just focus on tasks, consider ways that you can set goals that will help your employee to become an owner of the outcomes. Second, build clarity from the start. Performance planning is a perfect opportunity to help employees see where you're going, whether or not you've done that in the past. Have a conversation with your employee about your boss's goals and direction, and what that means insofar as your goals and direction. Help connect what you're asking of your employee to the stuff that matters to you and those above you. If your employee needs to develop in a specific area, say for instance customer service, or problem solving, or critical thinking, take the time to establish the success measures up front. You don't need to tell him how to do his job, but you do need to be specific about the differences that you perceive between kind of successful and really successful. You need to help him understand the difference so that he has a guide rail, so that he can monitor himself to guide and improve his own performance. You'll find even greater success if you take time to create that definition together. That shared definition becomes a yardstick by which both of you can measure and evaluate the employee's performance. At evaluation time, rather than debating and arguing about whether he did or didn't do it, you can both evaluate how close his performance matched the objective standard that you created together. Third, keep an open dialogue. Imagine opening your email one morning and finding your performance evaluation. Imagine that while you thought you were doing well, your boss doesn't seem to think the same. Imagine that you just learned that in your evaluation. In her book, Fierce Conversations, best-selling author Susan Scott reminds us that our careers, our organizations, our personal relationships, and our very lives succeed and then fail, gradually and then suddenly, one conversation at a time. None of us like surprises, whether we're individual contributors or supervisors, whether we're entry-level or experienced. And the higher the stakes, the more we're going to hate that surprise if it's negative or if it conflicts with our own perception. The antidote to this situation is not always easy to execute, but it's very straightforward. Engage in an ongoing conversation, a dialogue, not a monologue, about performance. Have the first conversation the first time your performance isn't what you expect. Find opportunities to praise what she's doing well, and not just to correct what she isn't doing well. Feedback can be easier to give if it's your sincere intent to grow and develop the individual, and not just correct the behavior. One conversation at a time, you'll build trust. And over time, that trust will help you to raise the bar higher, improve his performance, and ask him for more and more. These can be challenging concepts for some, and HR can help you, but you need to ask for that help early, before you have a problem. If you want to know more, talk with your HR business partner. If you don't have an HR business partner in your
Okay. All right, that was the video for the effective performance management planning. The emphasis being on doing a lot early so that it will allow you just to meet and do not debate. Just check how close both of you are towards meeting what was stipulated and agreed upon at the earlier stage. It is not easier than any of what has been mentioned earlier on. So I still believe it is easier. I still believe it is doable. I do believe as part of trying to improve the performance within the institution, we can adopt some of these. I'll obviously take some reflections if there are any. Etienne, anything you would like to add thus far before we move to look at templates?
I think you covered most of the important issues. Something that I do find that people forget about is the fact to come and speak to your HR business partner if you do not understand anything regarding these issues. We are there to assist, and we do these type of formal training, but we also do informal workshops, specifically looking at all the templates. We are going to change to an electronic system during the course of next year. So the templates you're going to see here is the ones that we're currently using, but it may change as we go on, which will then change everything into an electronic version where your performance agreement, your assessment, as well as the job profile are all available on the system-wise itself. We are busy developing, and it will be fully finalized by the end of 2021. That's all from my side. I think more when we start getting into the forms, I'll raise a couple of urgent points on that.
Okay, great stuff. And yes, we did check earlier on about the system part, and I'm glad to hear that there is definitely progress, because it will make a great deal of time saving because of the level of involvement on this particular process. So what we're looking at is individual performance agreement. We're not going to look much into the departmental. We're not going to look much into the institutional. Most of them look more or less at the same level. Should you need specifically for the department, as Etienne has indicated, feel free to contact the HR department. They can take you through. The first part of the information is demographic related information. And I think you, as an incumbent or your line manager, will know clearly what information need to be provided. In this particular case, I do know in terms of the type of employment, the policy, if I'm not mistaken, used to stipulate that anyone who is employed for 3 months and above is required to undertake or undergo this particular process. That includes people who are on probation. And as you know, the law, it does not exclude a person who's on probation as if he is not employed. That person is employed. As a matter of fact, if you decide not to employ the person, you need to provide evidence that either he did not perform, and you should be able to indicate why and what did you do to correct the underperformance, as it were. So for the sake of ensuring that we are aligned to the legal framework, we needed to look at some of those aspects. So for all intents and purposes, someone who's employed on a temporary basis in terms of the law, it talks about someone who's employed less than 3 months. I think the policy had indicated that there's no need for one to embark onto intensive performance management. But because the person is supposed to be here and delivering output, there should be some form of managing his or her output during that time. Compulsory level, 3 months and above, within the first month of employment, there should be an agreement in place. And then from there, you should be able to start knowing exactly what is expected from you. Section A, work output. As we had indicated earlier on, that there are 3 sections: work output, competencies in terms of behavior and values, In this template, we're looking at the work output as the main. There's a section on values because people are encouraged to know the values of the company, not that they will be assessed on it as it were at this particular stage. So I, undersigned, hereby agree to the KPAs and KPIs reflected herein and that have been outlined for the purpose of performance agreement. Now, this write-up might change. You might find that what I'm reading and what is exactly utilized is slightly changed. But the important part is that you knowingly embark on this, understanding what it is supposed to mean. Because when you say, I hereby agree, you say, I agree that I have certain KPAs expected, and I've spent time with my manager to allocate a weighting on each of the KPAs. And these KPAs have got tasks, and these tasks have got certain expectation in terms of yardsticks of measurement, indicators, and then there's expected time frame for delivery of some of these tasks, if not all. And should I need certain resources, I'll be able to stipulate what those resources are. And we say optional because in some cases they might not need for you to complete such. Now, once that has been completed, then there's comment. Remember, we are saying performance management system enable engagement. It's not a line manager writing this and you just take and sign. And even if it means you did that, you can be able to make some comments at the bottom. I acknowledge that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It might be reviewed. It's not clear, and so forth and so forth. Because both of you are encouraged to make comments. There's nothing close and shut door situation. It's about articulating and keeping on record some of the things you obviously want to know about. So obviously each aspect of the KPI is exactly the same. However, there might be differences in terms of the details. KPA, the difference. At a later stage, in terms of our maturity, as I've indicated, you will find that we have a KPA descriptor, or we have a KPA name, then we have a KPA definition. And all that will ultimately appear onto our template so that we will know what we mean exactly by a KPA. That also will allow at some stage that we can reuse KPAs for certain positions. I'm just making an example. I'm not intending to create any confusion, but just to show as we navigate our level of maturity further, how do we grow this very model that we have been able to adopt within the institution. So that is one part in terms of the KPA. I did mention that the university has got the values. The university does encourage values to be observed and adhered to. However, at this stage, we have not gone further to cover, explain, unpack, or illustrate behaviors to be demonstrated in supporting certain values. Innovation has been defined. Promoting attributes of excellence, creativity, and discovery amongst management, student, and staff. Efficiency, sustaining high level of productivity. Mutual trust, inculcating dependable and trustworthy relationship and mutual respect. These definitions are good to understand. However, when you want to get to a stage of measuring performance in lieu of values, you have to unpack the examples of behavior that would be applicable, because this is what we are measuring. The definition assists us to crystallize the understanding. So this is a best practice in terms of how we then develop these measurability for consistency's sake. Now, if these are in your performance agreement, at the end of the term, be it midterm or end of the year, we'll be coming back and say, did you demonstrate this behavior? You know it, contributors know it, everyone knows it, because values are applicable to everyone the same way. Does not change for the manager versus the employee. Trust is trust. Accountability, efficiency, and teamwork is exactly that. So at the end of the term, when the question, appropriate, measurable question of behavioral example is posed, it's not coming to you as a surprise. What will rather differ is the yardstick of measurement. Are we going to use 1 to 3 scale? Are we going to use 1 to 5 scale? Or are we going to use any particular scale? So far, 1 to 5 is a common scale within the university. So because we already know what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 means, then all what will appear here is the behavioral example in lieu of a particular value and an appropriate scoring mechanism that would be utilized accordingly. However, this is not currently being used as a measurement of performance in the current regime, because the university executive felt that let us allow the university to stabilize on the work output first, then we can increase our scope of performance measurement to the next level. That is why on this version remains like this. I'm not too sure on the final version, even to employees, whether it appears at all, but values, as it were, part of the strategy 2015 to 2021, these are the values I understand are still appearing within our midst in the university. PDP, we spoke about it, personal development plan. It's not good to say this is what is expected from you and you find yourself a way of being capacitated or grow or get necessary knowledge rather, yes, that's the word I'm looking for, knowledge to be able to do the work. In some of the tasks that are given above as part of the KPAs, there will be certain knowledge you might not have. Then this allows you to be able to identify some intervention that can be utilized to close that gap. You might not have experience in having done certain things. You can then identify whether do you require this, or is it required by the organization? Is it a need you have, or is it a gap that has been established? So depending on which is of them applicable, you are able then to indicate what is required, what is needed, what is the gap, what is the intervention that we're going to embark on, when are we intending to embark on the same. When we say the line manager must make sure that employee is accountable on personal development planning, is because there are time frames that are assigned to this, so that by the end of the period, you are equipped. I still don't understand, and I'm using this word loosely, guys. I still don't understand why an employee would still underperform with all these in play. Now, whilst you are able to provide comment at a KPA level, not much at the values, not much at the PDP, because already this just allows us to plan something new. At the end, you are able to sign this particular document. Done. All what needs to happen now is we need then to move into the evaluation part at the end of the performance process, so that we can be able to ascertain how one has been able to perform. And this is a performance assessment form that we are able to look at. So you can imagine with the automation process taking place, it will be much more easier, because some of this information will be pre-populated, I presume, and one just needs to be able to fill in the areas and focus on what needs to be done. For an example, already during the planning phase, you would have had a key performance area. I hope you can see the spreadsheet. Let me just check firstly before I can steer fast forward. Can we see the spreadsheet?
Yes.
Okay. So the key performance areas are already in the agreement. The activities are already in the agreement. Any amendments made during the course of the performance cycle are amended on the agreement. What becomes important is that we all populate that information towards the performance assessment form. And if it's done systematically, it becomes automated. So that means then coming here, we don't have to reinvent the wheel and start to think, what should we put in? We know exactly it is there. All what we need to focus on is what was achieved. Both an employer, line manager, and an employee have to fill that area so that they can justify their own rating. That's number one. Number two, as you can see the form currently presented, it has got an employee rating and a manager rating. These will appear in the final rating. So in other words, we don't delete the employee and delete the manager and then put the manager or the employee's rating in there. Both of them, the idea is that they should appear, so that when this form is submitted to HR and beyond, there should be an understanding, okay, we can see how both contributors rated an incumbent. And if it means there are issues of queries because of misalignment or non-agreements, there should be an understanding. But what was your rating as an employee? 2. What was your rating as a manager? 2 or 3, or whichever kind of deviation that there might be. So what causes a disagreement, and then we're able to establish that, and HR is obviously able to assist. So what becomes important is that the final score, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Etienne, the final score was never intended to be an average of a manager and an employee. It was intended to be a final, it's not a score, sorry, a rating. The final rating was intended to be a rating both persons would have agreed upon, as opposed to add the 2 and divide by 2. Correct?
You're 100% correct. The employee rates themselves, the manager rates themselves, then you have the discussion and you agree on that specific rating. So it's not just the one divide by the other one. So, and that's very important as well. I must also just say, as time progressed, we have also started making changes to this form to bring in another column which would actually ask the employees to provide us with evidence. We put in a portfolio of evidence. It is just after the column what was achieved. There's a place now for evidence that they have to embed the evidence itself. So if you get a score...
Etienne, sorry to disturb you there. If you have a form within the reach of your fingers, I can allow you to share that one. I mean...
Yeah, I've got it in front of me.
Let me stop sharing. I'll stop share on my side, and then I'll allow you to share. Let me allow you to share. You can just click and share so that at least we can all see it. That will be very helpful.
Okay, let me just get it. Right, can everyone see this form?
Yes.
Right. We made a couple of small changes to the whole form as we went on, because we saw there were certain things they don't indicate. So what it just made it much easier now, it tells you what to do as well. So you've got your red portions. It tells you what is the activities that is needed. Now these activities can be brought directly from your job profile as well as your performance agreement. The key performance areas bring in there, and there is 10 action points or a maximum of 10 KPIs as well. It then asks you, after you've done your performance indicators and you put them down here, what was achieved? If your achievement and your rating is 4 or above, you have to provide proof of that in terms of the performance agreement. So what we find there is that the file becomes very big because people embed issues like minutes of meetings where something happened. You know, so a portfolio of evidence is something that each one of the employees must start working on. So from your first day, if something happens, open yourself a little file where you can put in something that you have done where the people told you were excellent or you were above average on that specific one. And then you can use that portfolio of evidence and embed it or either attach as we move on with this. From this, it's now a drop-down list because we have people putting in 1.5s and 1.2s and 1.3s and 7.9s and all these funny things. So you can only score a person a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, or a 5. The same with the management. They will do exactly the same. They will put in a rating there. So let's say for one of these things, there's a 3. The manager said, no, I don't think you were up to standard. You were a 2. You see there is no total because it's not agreed yet. So when the manager and the employee sits down and they come to agreement on that specific point, they say, agree, this is a 3. It will also ask you, what is the weighting of this specific key performance area? If you don't put it in, right at the bottom of the form, it now shows you an error and says, there's an error, you are not on 100% of your total. So it automatically does that for you. So the weightings is very important to transfer that from your agreement to here. And say we said that one was 50%, and they've got another rating here of, say, agreement of 4, and this rating is also 50%, you will then find that right at the bottom of this form, it says 100%. The person's performance scores, therefore, is calculated and worked out as 70%. And then at the same time, it tells you where the person lies on that, occasionally above the average score. So some of these things has just been enhanced to make it easier for people to understand and also ensure that everyone can do that. There's also automatic printing documents now, where everything that you do on this worksheet is brought over to a summary, which you also have to sign in the finals. Now, there's mid-year scores, there's final scores, there's assessments and everything that sits on the summary side of that. And of course, very important, the comments of the employee and the comments of the employer. The manager will put in their comments. Why are they saying this is your rating? It's important that that's there, but it's also important that you as an employee puts down why you want, why you feel this is right, and where do you want to work on. It's signed by both parties, and it's only then submitted. You see there's an automatic print button and the print summary. So we just try to make it a little bit easier for everyone to understand and easier for everyone to complete this document. You will find that this assessment is going to happen, we suspect, closer to the end of September, November, but most probably early next year. This is the reason, because of COVID, that has changed our academic program, which now ends in February 2021. And just to also get back to the point that was made earlier, for posts, like for instance, all our academic posts, we've got generics for them. So for every level of academic, there's a generic performance agreement. If you sit in a post where there's 20 of you and you are all security guards, you all will have the same performance agreement. It may be that because a person's got a specific skill, that individual will actually have a additional line or additional activity that's brought in. For people that do not have that, unfortunately, yes, you draft your own key performance area, but we do have a library of a lot of the performance agreements, so it's quite easy. If you don't have one and you're not sure about that, just contact your HR business partner and they can assist and look through it and see what they can provide you with. We've done 90% of all job profiles. Only the departments that's now being restructured does not have full-blown approved job profiles yet. But for the rest, there is 90%, there is job profiles. If I may ask any questions on that?
Yeah, Etienne.
Yes, Shati.
On the body of evidence section,
Yes.
if I've got it correct, it's only if an employee puts in under the drop down there 4 or above, a rating of 4 and above, that they need to actually submit a body, some portfolio evidence for that particular rating. Is it, do I have it correct?
That's correct. That is for the final assessment that comes through. What I usually tell my...
A rating 1 to 3, they don't have to produce that. It's a 4 and 5 where they are forced, they have to submit that.
Yes, they have to submit that in their formal one. What I do advise all my managers and deans and HODs, I do advise them that when a person puts in their score, that they provide you with evidence, even if it's a 3, so that you can have a good discussion. And even if it's a 2, why has that not been done? What has happened in that one? Because that helps you in your initial evaluation when you sit down with a person and you want to assess as well as correct and make corrective actions. But for the final one, for everything that's 4 and above, it has to be, proof has to be provided.
Okay.
Just another thing also, something I do find a lot of times is you get this. And it comes through to HR and it looks like this. Or, sorry. And this is done for every single thing. So in other words, we said there's 2 KPIs in this case. This person gets a 4 for everything. Or the person gets a 5 for everything. And you usually find that all the employees in that specific section, it looks exactly the same. I can guarantee you it will be sent back and a nasty letter will be written to your HOD. And if you are a director, you will find that you are going to have a problem. We look at traits. We actually go and we sit and do some matrix to see what the scoring lines is and what's the curve of all scoring. And it's very easy for us to see that this is skewed. We need to change that. So therefore, when you score, like it was said, you know, you get people that try to manipulate the system. There is checks and balances in the system itself where we actually pick that up and it becomes a little bit of a problem. And then you will have to redo it. So rather do it properly and then speak to each other about it. And if you've got a problem, bring in your HR business partner. Our job is there to assist and guide people, not only management, but also employees.
Yeah, but Etienne, with that, for instance, if you look at my directorate, right? Some of my supervisors have, for instance, cleaning staff with 150 cleaners.
Yeah.
A lot of them will look exactly the same.
Yeah, what you will find in yours mostly is you will find that most of them are either sitting on a 3 and you get 1 or 2 that's sitting on 2s.
Yes.
Very few sits on a 4 and above because it's actually very hard. Like the example that I always use is a person in payroll has a D date to pay the people.
Yes.
If you miss that D date, immediately you are 1. If you meet that D date, immediately you are 3. If you pay before the payday, you're back to a 1. So therefore, where can you score? You can only score a 3 or a 1.
It's exactly the same in my department. Because, for instance, a cleaner, if she came to work and cleaned, she did her job, it's a 3. I can't say she's a 4 cleaner. You know what I mean? It's either she didn't clean or she cleaned. So it's either she's a 1 or a 3. That's it. Hence, I'm saying a lot of mine will be exactly the same.
Yeah.
In that particular section, or the gardening services, for instance. It's only when I get to my management positions, like maybe not in my management position, but the more senior ones that are a bit more specialized, where I can actually, actually have a conversation with them. But with the other ones, and that's the bulk, that's 200 over 200 staff members. Those will be pretty much the same. It's either 1 or 3. That's it.
Yeah, I agree with you. What I usually say is that what we need to do is, as time progresses, we need to look at opportunities under your activities specifically, because a key performance area for all of them would be exactly the same. Most of the activities will be exactly the same as well. But you can look at your indicators and try to agree a midpoint, which is a 3, and what would be a 4. You know, if you have a cleaner that the person cleans the offices and it's done according to the principle, it's 100%. But if the cleaner also comes in and asks the people, is there anything I can help with? Suddenly decides, okay, so she's going to wash all the cups, which is not part of her job profile or his job profile or his description, then you can start looking at those type of things. But we'll have to sit down, specifically in your department, we will have to sit down and decide what will constitute a 3 and what would be a 4. And that must be an agreed thing within the group. The unfortunate thing is also, of course, the group that you're working with, a lot of them has got, academically qualifications and those type of things. The understanding is on a different level. So it is a task. It is a big task you're going to be thrown in. But currently, yes, I agree. Most of your things would be either 3 or 2.
Because the other thing is, let's go back to the cleaner. Because I've got a shortage of staff, I actually don't want them to go and do anything additional. I want them to only do what I need them to do and then move on to the next place. So yeah. I'm actually, because of my own problems in my department, I'm actually starving them of opportunities to get a 4, because I'm telling them that should you wash a cup, in fact, I'll make you a 1. Because I'm short-staffed, I need you to go to the library, then I need you to go do the reses, then I need you. So if you carry on with unnecessary stuff for other people just to get smiles from other people, then you're getting a frown from me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's also correct. Is currently, I know the situation.
Yeah.
It is a problem area. That's why I say we will have to, as time progress, and also as we start sorting out the structure within the cleaning services, we will have to start looking at those type of things. And I agree, yes, if a person goes the extra mile, but they're still meeting all their targets, that's when you will start looking at a 4. 4 is exceeding the average performance in most of the occasions. And management is quite harsh on when do you get to that point. So yeah, it is an issue, and I've got a lot of sympathy for you. But we will have to look at those type of things when we specifically get into performance management. Ndumiso is your business partner, but I would also suggest that at a stage we sit down with Luwazi and have a discussion. How can we do this? But it can only be done if the current structure is first sorted and decisions are made. I agree with you.
Okay, cool.
Any other questions? Happiness.
Thank you very much, Etienne. That was quite interesting. I'm enjoying to see someone else doing the demo of the form. and the level of improvement you've also done, this is quite interesting, and keep it up that way.
Yeah, I can also just tell you that the IPA form has also changed a little bit.
Okay.
It's not a lot of changes on it. But
if you do have it close by, just flash it as well. I mean, that's part of the practicals we actually are engaging in, so that at least people can get the right kind of information, not just a generic one.
Right. The current form, I'm going to share mine because it's usually easier to see something.
Yeah.
So currently, this is, for instance, how it's filled in. We've got your individual levels, which are all remains unchanged. Then what we have is we now also brought in priority. So means of verification and evidence, it was in the previous form, but we also brought in priorities, because as the year goes on, we can say, look, this is a priority, but that is not a priority. So therefore, in my agreement, it will score a lower level, or it may even not be in my assessment in the end of the day. Just as a simple example, we decided to move over to ITS 4.1. Now, this should have happened in 2018 to 2019. But as a result of certain operational issues, we are moving over and we've gone live this week. So whose fault is that? It cannot be my fault as a project leader, or it cannot be the fault of any of the managers, because this was an executive decision as a result of certain issues. So therefore, you won't evaluate a person on that point. So in your assessment, you will take that one out, because it's not possible. Or either and you cannot score 0 so that you take it out of that, but it will remain within your performance agreement. Some managers like the mid-year progress, where they ask, look, this is the time frame, but tell me what has happened while we were busy with this. What is your current issues? And then, of course, we've got the resources requirement, which is financial, and what we brought in is human as well. So is there financial, is there human resources, is there any of these needs? The importance is, this is your KPI that you copy into your assessment. This is your activity that you copy into your assessment as well. And then this will all be your key indicators. This will tell us how can we, this is the type of evidence that you will have to bring in. Where what you use to say, yes, in the recruitment plan, I've drawn up the recruitment plan, but the recruitment plan was seen as above average. It worked out well. All targets was met plus extra. And that will then give you a 4 against that specific one. So it's just a couple of subtle changes to make it easier in the end of the day. Like it was said, and I like what you said, this is not a dormant document. It's not a thing that you do and once a year HR comes to you and say, you have to do it, and you say, oh, damn, it's again those damn HR people. We have so much other work to do. We are teaching, we are doing that. This is a document that you must use to be dynamic and check yourself against constantly. It's very important that your targets that you're meeting or your agreements that you're meeting, if there's something new, to bring that into your performance agreement. It can happen that it's only for a period of 6 months, and then you can put that down and say, this is expected of me for 6 months. Shati has indicated the fact of staffing. There is quite a lot of frustration regarding that because there are restructuring taking place. So we have to look at that. We all know the impact of the students and the payment of the students is causing as an impact on our staffing as well. So therefore, we need to look at that and use this method to actually see what am I achieving, or what did I forget, or what must I bring in. I've told for instance, all the academics in their new agreements, they have to bring in electronic classes. It wasn't in the previous one, it says use of electronic mediums. But now we'll bring in and say, yes, you can use stuff like Blackboard, Moodle, preparation, videos, all those things are now coming into those things, which was never there in the past. So it's not a stagnant document, it is a document you have to use. When I was taught performance management, I was said, here's a file, stick it under your arm, and if you come to my office to say hello, you bring that file with, because that's what we're talking about. One of the phrases was also used, which I hated with a passion, but later on I actually brought into the action, is that you as a manager are just as good as your worst employee. But the other side is also so. You as an employee can only be as good as that to make your manager look. So it's a two-way dialogue. We're all dependent on each other. Any question on this?
And then just the last part, the bottom part, if ever there are any on the completed one after all the KPIs.
The performance, personal development. What's been brought in there, of course, is now if there's a cost to it and the cost is known, Also, when do we expect this to take place? And if it hasn't taken place, what happened? In this case, this was cancelled. So therefore, you can't. We couldn't do it. So we've done it for a different one. And then there's various. You bring on all your coaching. So this is really very close to what it is, but except for the fact that there's just a couple of extra columns that was brought in to actually provide more information. This information is taken by the OD section. They then collate everything and then look at who needs what training. Say, for instance, there's 50 people that says, I want Excel training. They will then take that, look at it, put it into the money that they have, and arrange a meeting. You will get an email, and your manager will get an email that says to you, listen, we've arranged a meeting for that time and that time and that time. Which day can you go? Exactly the same as performance management. Performance management, we said we need to train people. So therefore, the people put it in, and then we divide them in groups for that. So that's what the use of this is. It's also extremely important if you yourself see, I will need to develop into a different direction. What you must not put in here is, for instance, if you say, I want to do a BA degree, because I feel I've only got a matric now and I want to go further. For that, there's a study bursary, so it's a separate issue. These are short courses and skills development, specifically looking at that.
Great stuff. I think that's quite a comprehensive demonstration on these templates. Thank you very much, Etienne. Are there any questions from anyone? On any aspect that we have covered this today, basically. We will not necessarily be covering all aspects, but drawing reference to what you have within your MIST is the reference guide with the scenarios that we spoke about right from the beginning as to the context, where should we begin in dealing with performance management, and the PM, Prof PM does provide how to use divisional, faculty, departmental, operational plan to come up with an annual performance agreement as part of the contributing factors input documents, and the PM Prof does provide that input. How to develop a performance agreement using job description as an input. Prof PM does provide that input as well. How to develop key performance indicators. And I think that one, perhaps in most cases, people find it a bit grayish to come up with a consistent way. And I think through some examples and looking at what some of the completed agreement looks like, including the one that Etienne is giving us a demo on, is very helpful to demonstrate that particular point. During the reference guide, we'd use the financial management as a KPA with the activities and the KPAs in this particular exercise. So the reference guide is self-help kind of document. And I don't want to belabor the point, obviously on the basis that it's a straightforward document. As Etienne has said, should you navigate this and find any challenges, feel free to touch base with the HR business partners. They are there to assist exactly all of us to make sure that we understand these document the discipline as it is adopted within the institution. Etienne, unless if there's anything else that I might have missed, I did mention at the beginning that in the slides that we have shared, it does have some exercise where employees attending are formed into groups and go through work on specific job profiles, populate an agreement, and then come back to present in the plenary, and then obviously do the assessment and come and do and present. It is much more practical and meaningful when we do it in live sessions, but because of the limitation of how we engage, we won't necessarily be doing it that way, unless if you've got another view on that one.
I'm happy from my side. I think time-wise, it does take you quite a while. So if everyone else is happy, from my side, I don't think there's a major issue. That when you write these things also, please do not be scared to call me or anyone. I'll direct you to the right people. Your business partners, if you don't know them, you can also just drop me an email and I'll make sure that your business partner is introduced to you. But most of them, you have seen them when you were employed. It's just that in my case, for instance, I work very closely with the organization development section. So therefore, I had to develop all these forms for them to assist and while we're getting to other place. But please ask the questions. And if you haven't got your profile, speak to your manager, develop one, or ask if there is one. We can always provide and see in the library, and then go ahead and do that. And then we can talk about those things. That would be my feeling, if you are happy with that.
Yeah, no, great stuff. And one of the last comments from my side in closing, the video that is recorded for the session today will be made available, which means you can set time and replay all of it, and from beginning to end. I think that will be quite helpful. It's part of the resources that we generate to support the understanding, the learning, and obviously the adoption and internalizing of the discipline. So within a couple of days, we'll then make the videos available. Over the slides and everything else, including some examples that we provided. If it can all be put in one place as part of the body of knowledge, as we spoke earlier on, then it can be made available. Unless if there are any other questions from the house, I would like to take this opportunity and hand over back to Etienne for closing remarks. I think it was a pleasure and an honor to serve you once again and be able to assist in navigating the maze of this very wonderful and, in my world, entertaining subject of performance management. Thank you very much.